Thank you very much. Okay, I will have a motion for that then, please.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder?
I'll second it. Lois.
Lois. Business arising out of the minutes. I'm seeing none here. Call for a declaration of conflict of interests. So having reviewed the items that we're going to be reviewing today, if anybody would like to declare a conflict of interest, now would be the time to do so. Okay, I'll give everybody one more chance. Anybody want to declare conflict of interest? No, looks like we're good. Okay, great. Consideration of deferred business. There is none. Item 7, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. I'm seeing none. Although actually, now that I say that, I'm wrong. There was one item of correspondence. Like Simon, I caught myself this time. So there was one item of correspondence that was circulated to the committee that was received yesterday. We can choose to evaluate this item of correspondence, I believe now, or we can defer it to when we're having discussions later on. Simon, that's right? Yeah, we can do either.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. My sense is that maybe we defer that until following our discussions on the items, just in the sense that we have to have a discussion on moving our November and December meetings anyway. So is that okay with everybody?
Yes, that sounds good.
I should just actually, just to make sure, I think that where it potentially would be best actually to discuss this during the correspondence, or if it relates to a particular item, we would potentially be able to discuss it as part of that item. But if it's about an independent matter, it's best to probably discuss this general correspondence during the correspondence section.
Sure. Okay, that sounds good. Just give me 1 second here. I am just opening up that piece of correspondence.
It addresses 9.1.2.
Oh, yes, I see.
So
okay,
maybe in there, Jen.
Yeah, thank you, Lois. I think that that's probably a good time to discuss it, is to defer to 9.1.2. Okay, great. We'll do that then. Awesome. Thanks, Lois. Our next item is information items brought forward. There are none. And now we will move into reports and discussion. We have two items from staff today. The first is item 9.1.1, case H00510, request to include 5663 Cornwall Street, Halifax in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality. I'm going to hand this over to someone on staff. I'm not sure who yet. I think Jesse. I'm right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yep, so this is my item. I'll just wait till Simon has a chance to upload the PowerPoint, but in the meantime, assuming everyone can hear me okay?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, perfect. So as noted, this is the heritage registration request for case 510 or 5663 Cornwall Street in Halifax. This request stems from an application by the property owner, AMK Bear Investments, which was made in April 2021, earlier this year. So next slide, please. This slide provides some context to the subject site. It's still changing over here. Right, so some context to the subject site, which consists of two different parcels here. Located just east of the Halifax Common, near the intersection of Cornwall Street and Maynard Street. The site has frontage on both streets and contains a large T-shaped building, which is pictured here on the right. This building has a max height of 3 stories, though the original rear rings are 2 stories in height. So the former factory building was constructed in the Italianate style in 1884. Given that this building straddles 2 different properties, staff just like to note that both properties would need to be included in the registration if it is in fact successful. So next slide, please. As always, these are the criteria, evaluation criteria when we're assessing heritage buildings. There's 6 categories, each with a maximum score for a total cumulative value of 100 points. So if the HAC today gives a score of 50 or more points, it would advance to a heritage hearing. Next slide, please. So starting with the first category, which is age. So this property has a long-standing connection to manufacturing and commercial purposes. Spans over 170 years. The deed from 1858 shows that the property once contained a nail factory and several homes. It was then converted to a broom and bucket manufacturing company. And then in 1861, John McLean and John Campbell purchased the property to house their tobacco manufacturing company. The duo, together with John McLaughlin, their superintendent, rebranded the company to Mayflower. After a number of years, the superintendent, John McLaughlin, did purchase the lands and the company, which he in turn sold in January 1884. 3 months after he sold the property, the factory burned down pretty tragically. So the image on the left is the Hopkins Atlas, which shows roughly what it looked like during McLaughlin's ownership in 1878. You can see a T-shaped building starting to emerge there. And then it was gone by 1884. So newspaper articles from that same year say that the owner intended to rebuild the building using a T-shaped layout. And then by 1889 on the right, you can see that in fact was done. So next slide, please. So subsequent documentation show that that building still exists today. The form is largely there and relatively unchanged, as you can see from this photo and some other photos in the research report. So given this, staff feel that a score of 13 points is warranted as it was constructed in 1884.
Okay, we'll pause for discussion about that. I think we typically go with staff's recommendations based on there being a little flexibility in this one. Is everybody okay with a score of 13 for age?
Yes.
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 No argument.
I need to go back to my former way of asking questions, which is anybody not okay with the 13? Okay, so we're going to carry forward with 13. Thanks, Jesse.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next slide. So the property has a long-standing association with Halifax's manufacturing history dating back to the early to mid 19th century. Specifically, its connection to 3 important companies. The first, of course, being the Mayflower Tobacco Company, which operated on site from 1861 until 1903. So again, the John McLean, John Campbell started the business in 1860 and then moved to this subject site 1 year later. Over time, the company produced many different brands known as Twists, 12s, Navy 6s, and of course, the most well-known being the Mayflower Brand. It was the first company east of Ontario to produce tobacco that competed with American companies. And then by 1870s, it employed 130 people and produced 500,000 pounds in product on an annual basis. So the Mayflower brand became quite well known in North America and internationally, as it won some awards at both the London and Dublin expositions. So next slide, please. The second company is Moore's Limited, which is a candy and box manufacturing company, which was on site in the early 1900s. It was originally founded by Benjamin Moore, who opened a bakery originally on Brunswick Street in the 1830s. So over time, the company expanded to include a flour mill on Argyle Street, and then a confectionery chocolate plant, and eventually the subject property as well. So at that time, in the early 1900s, it had several Canadian branches and international agencies, and the Moore family continued to own and operate the building until 1956. Next slide, please. And lastly, we have W.H. Schwartzen's Sons, which is a spice and dry food manufacturer. They also produced things like jams, peanut butter, cake fillers, and coffee. The company was founded by William Schwartz in 1841, but the company started to really become well known once he opened a storefront on Brunswick Street in 1889. So his son eventually came into the company as well and became the first person in Canada to sell pure spices, as they had previously been mixed with flour. And then by 1930s, their products sold to over 50 countries. Next slide, please. So Schwartzen Sons was actually owned by the family until the 1980s, and then continues to operate today under different ownership. And due to these sites' connections to Halifax manufacturing, we'd recommend a score of 11 to 15 points.
That's an outstanding commercial and industrial history for the property. I'd be inclined to recommend 14 or 15.
This is Patrick.
I'm gonna
I
agree
would go
with
for 15 as well.
Oh, one sec, two people talking at once.
I said 15 would be fine with me.
Sure,
Yeah.
thanks, Sandra.
Patrick said the same thing. 15 is great. These are iconic businesses for Halifax. So top score.
Absolutely.
Same here. I'll put my score in the chat line. 15 is fine for me.
I would support that as well.
I would support that as well.
Okay, that's everybody. I think we will go with a 15. Thanks very much, Jesse. That was very interesting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next criteria is architect or builder, and fortunately this time we were able to locate the architect, who was Henry Frederick Bush, so a well-known architect in Nova Scotia. He originally started working for architect Henry Elliott in 1861. Apologize for that one typo there. He originally started working with him as a draftsman, but then 2 years later, the two formed a formal partnership. The duo specialized in Italianate and Gothic Revival architecture, and they built many well-known buildings in Halifax, including West House, which is pictured here and located on Brunswick Street, along with the Universalist Church, which is also on Brunswick Street. So Henry Bush eventually parted ways and branched off on his own and became well known for his Second Empire designs and brick construction. And throughout his career, he continued to use a lot of Gothic detailing in his buildings as well. So next slide, please. You'll see one of his well-known buildings, the Halifax Academy, which is located on Brunswick Street. Again, this is a Second Empire building constructed of brick. He also designed the Khyber building on Barrington Street and Victoria Hall as well, which was recently before the HAC. So given that many of his buildings still exist and they're municipally registered, and he garnered a strong provincial interest, staff would recommend a score of 4 to 6 points for the site's architect.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I would tend to agree. That's a lot of recognizable name drop buildings that we can do there. So anybody else on the committee want to contribute anything to this conversation? Or voice what you prefer between 4 and 6?
I'd aim higher as, this is Patrick, I'd aim higher as it seems to be the sole example of a commercial building from this architect in town.
Sorry, are you saying higher like point wise?
Yeah.
I think, well, I mean, I think what our matrix is asking us to do, at least, should we choose to obey, is look at whether the builder or the architect was nationally or provincially significant. So staff's recommending that they're provincially significant with a 4 to 6.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go to nationally significant, but I'd say.
Oh, okay. You mean higher on the
score.
end of the 4 to 6? Yeah.
5 or a 6, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, we have a 5 or 6 on the table.
I would definitely go with 6.
I would go with 6 as well.
I would agree.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Leslie. Sorry for interrupting you. Okay, that sounds great. So we're going to go with
6 here as well. 6 here as well.
Thank you, Counselor. And Sandra has put in the chat, architecture builders for 6. Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next slide, which focuses on architectural merit, first being construction. So the building has a timber frame construction, which is also known as post and beam, which was common through the early 1800s, but as you get deeper into the 1800s, it becomes less and less popular as a construction technique. So timber framing really consists of large or heavy squared off wooden timbers that are secured with woodworking joints and pegs. Due to advances in construction techniques in the late 1800s, wood buildings started being clad with other materials, and as such, this building was clad with brick. And we also found in some newspaper articles, just as kind of an interesting tidbit, that the ground story is supported by 2 rows of 6-inch wood pillars. And we don't often get that level of detail for some of the properties that we review here. So next slide, you'll see staff's recommendation. The construction technique is really a late example of post and beam construction. However, there are very few post and beam buildings that are clad with brick left in Halifax. So staff would suggest a bit wider range here, between 4 to 10 points, depending on how the committee wishes to land.
Okay, I will put that on the floor for discussion then. Thanks, Jesse.
I would suggest at least an 8 on that.
Great, thank you, Councillor.
Lois, I would support an 8 as well. It's the integrity of the structure is amazing.
Mhm.
This is Marisha. I would support an 8 as well, especially for all of the brick, which is quite rare in Halifax as well.
I agree as well.
I agree as well.
I agree.
I would agree as well.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's everybody. Okay, we're going to go with an 8 for architectural merit.
Okay, great. So yeah, the second part of architectural merit is, of course, the style. So it's constructed in the Italianate style, which was common locally between 1850 and 1900s. So it's a strong representation of the style. So Italianate commercial buildings were typically defined by a symmetrical facade, arch windows, which you can see here, brick exterior, and large cornices, amongst other features. This particular building has other character-defining elements as well, including its 3-story height and the original 2-story rear wings, the flat roof. It has a rubble stone foundation, and the original window fenestration, which you can see here, including the arch windows and the lug sills, amongst other detailing. So next slide, please. Given that it's very rare to find commercial Italianate buildings surviving in Halifax in the present day, most of which that did exist were demolished or damaged by the explosion, staff would recommend a score of 7 to 10 points for style.
Okay, we're looking at between 7 and 10 points. Does anybody want to?
I feel at least a 9. Just too bad the windows didn't look a little more authentic, but I guess they were replaced some years ago. But I would say a 9 easily.
Yeah, I think we're leaning in the direction of, while this is also a rare and early example, it's also the fact that there's not many of these left. So, all right, we've got an 8 or 9 on the table. I think 9, Councillor Hensby landed on.
This is Lois. I would support the 9 also.
I agree with 9.
I do as well. It's Leslie.
This is Patrick. 9 is good.
It's Luke. I agree with 9.
I would agree with 9. It's a beautiful building, and the fact that there's very few left, I would agree with the 9.
Hey, I think we're going to go with a 9 for the second category of architectural merit. Thank you, Jesse.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So the 5th scoring criteria is architectural integrity. So overall, the building still has good integrity as its original form, including the T-shape, and many of the original Italianate elements still exist on the property. But as Councillor Hensby did mention, there have been a number of alterations, several of which kind of deal with the windows. So the building originally had some 12-pane windows, all of which have been removed. There's a couple windows on the building, including the ground story window in this picture right at the corner, which have been blinded or filled in with brick. So you can still see the original opening, though there is no window anymore. The windows and doors are now modern vinyl or metal doors. And Moving on to the next slide, you'll see an original window on the south facade was enlarged and altered as well. And another significant alteration is a portion of the western rear wing did have to be rebuilt and was ultimately clad with metal siding. So there have been a number of alterations, but most of them have been done within the original window fenestration on the property. So staff feel that a score of 11 to 15 points is warranted. However, the HAC can feel free to disagree if they wish.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. I'm wondering if you could go back to the previous slide there. Okay, great. So this should remind people what we're talking about. So we're looking at architectural integrity. Staff is recommending, I've now forgotten, between 11 and 14, I think. 11 and 15, sorry. Does anybody want to put something on the table?
I'm leaning like a 13. Too bad all this cladding stuff occurred. I would have gave it a 14 or 15, but the cladding kind of took it away from me. Was there a picture I saw earlier in regards to possible a ground area that was bricked in that might have been the old coal chute area? I thought I saw a picture that looked like that.
So through you, Madam Chair, there are some portions of the building where windows or entryways have been blinded or filled in. I think you're referring, Councillor Hensby, to the back portion. I don't have the stat or the research report open, but I believe you're referring to the back portion of the eastern wing. There's kind of it looks like an old door or window that was also blinded in. I think that's what you're referring to. So there's a few examples of windows and doors being blinded.
Okay, so we have a 13 on the table. I'll open that up to discussion.
I think the fact that it survives the Halifax explosion means the building is pretty sturdy. And, you know, there's been a few alterations, but I don't think it takes away from the character of the building. So I would tend to agree with Councillor Hensby.
Okay, great. That's a 13, everybody. We're discussing a 13.
I can support a 13. I support that as well. It's Leslie.
I can as well, Sandra.
Patrick, I support 13.
13, Lois.
Luke, I support 13.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to go with a 13 for architectural integrity. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just in regards to that point that Councillor Hensby made, I pulled up the research report, and I believe he's referring to, and it could be wrong, but figure 11, page 15 of the staff report. On the eastern portion of the rear wing, you can see that several windows and potentially a door have been blinded there. I think that's what the council was referring to. But onward to the final criteria, which was relationship to surroundings. So this property has historical and physical connections to buildings, which also date back to the 19th century. So there's two buildings to the east and west of this property, which you can see on the right-hand portion of the image, which date back to that era as well, as long as several other buildings on the other side of Cornwall Street. In looking at this particular block, you can see the historic build form and character of the area is reasonably continuous along the street and further east as well, though it is disrupted partially by a large multi-unit residential building that is on the other side of the intersection. Additionally, this building really does serve as a landmark. Again, we've touched on it a little bit already, but there are very few warehouse buildings made of brick from the 1800s that remain in Halifax. So the building really does add some character to the area and help serve as a unique landmark. So with these considerations in mind, staff would recommend a score between 6 and 10 points.
Okay, great. We have 6 to 10 points on the table for the building. Is it an important architectural asset contributing to heritage character of the surrounding area? Does anybody want to put a number on the table?
I would suggest at least an 8. I just wish there was more brick buildings to have the continuity there in regards to the street, but since it's one of the last standing ones, I'd give it at least an 8, perhaps a 9. Could I ask in regards to the armories that are built behind it? When were the armories built? Because I kind of see the similarity with the brick color stuff. One is sure the armories was built to accent this building, or was this built to accent the armories in regards to brick color?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure the sequencing of construction. When we did this registration, we really focused on this particular property and the streetscape. I don't know if Aaron has more info like that on hand. If not, I mean, we could look into it and give some construction dates for those other properties as well. I just don't know the exact sequencing or if one really influenced the other.
1895, Jesse. I just Googled it. The armories was constructed.
Okay, so yeah, the armory would have been constructed about 11 years after this building. So the armory did also have different exterior materials, not brick, different material, though it would have had a similar color. I don't know if that was an intentional.
That's what I thought. Yeah, the armory is being built sandstone and all that stuff. It sounded uniquely coincidental that it's pretty close to the same color of stone, and I see that's very unique.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think Councillor Hensby said an 8 there. And I know that it's like one of the drawbacks there for you, Councillor, was that there are fewer brick buildings in the neighborhood. But I think one of the cool things about this, the relationship to the surroundings for this one, is that this is largely what this street would have looked like, for better or for worse. And also, you know, with obviously some obvious alterations. When this building was built, a lot of these houses are, you know, intact or have been rebuilt in the similar style to what was there when this house was built, or when this building was built. So I don't often chime in too loudly, but for me, this is more of a 9 or a 10, frankly.
This is Jennifer. I completely agree. I also look at the houses across the street, and I'm wondering if they were kind of like workers' houses, factory houses kind of thing. And so, yeah, I definitely think that it should be, I would fully support a 10.
I think Jenny and Jennifer have a very good point in terms of the streetscape and the history of the area. So I would support that as well.
Okay, well, maybe I'll open up the floor to a 10. If anybody wants to contribute to that.
I agree with 10, Sandra.
I would bend to that too. Like in the last standing building, I think we have to give it some credit. So I'll give you additional points.
This is the lowest. I'll support a 10 too.
This is Marisha. I'll put in it for a 10 as well.
Could I ask what, looking at that photograph, what the yellow building is to the west of the brick building that's under consideration? Yes, please. Do we know what that is? It certainly seems to be from essentially the same time period, well preserved, at least from this distance. And contributes as well. You're developing a unified whole for that block and possibly the corresponding block on to its south. I certainly support it.
Sorry, Liz. I think it's a residence. I just pulled it up. It is a residence. I've walked by it 1,000 times. I just pulled it up. It's like a like it's been converted into multis, but it's kind of a side-by-side duplex.
Okay,
with like full houses, but I would agree it's not a dissimilar era.
So through you, Madam Chair, I just looked up in our mapping. It looks like that building contains right now 6 units. The abutting building contains 6 units and is residential. When we looked at this application, I mean, just looking at the surrounding context, we did, as staff, just have a quick chat about that building and trying to gauge roughly when it was. We didn't do a deep dive into it yet, but it's unclear if that was the original form of the building or if there were some modifications over time, but it would have been likely constructed in a similar era. We just would need to do more research to know exactly what it looked like when it was registered or if it did have some changes or additional work over time. But it is very much of a similar era. Just can't say how many of the features are original or not without doing some digging into historical photos.
It's not registered, right, Jesse?
No, it's not. So there, in that area, there's no other registered properties in the immediate area of Cornwall in this block.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's Aaron Murnahan. Just for a little additional context, this is within the proposed Creighton's Fields Heritage Conservation District, which will likely be coming forward, in the next 5 or 6 years, we would hope. But this whole area was basically subdivided and developed around the 1860s through the 1870s. So many of the residences reflect sort of that mid to late Victorian box style. And I believe the residence on the right-hand side of the photograph is a semi-detached, and that's the oldest building remaining on the street to my knowledge.
It's a remarkable streetscape that's emerging, and it will be good to see it become part of a heritage district.
I'll add just a note to that. This building, I've just looked it up, is actually for sale if anybody would like to purchase a potential heritage asset. Okay, sorry, Jesse, we've completely derailed this, but anyway. I think we had a 10 on the table, and I think that Lois, you had agreed to that too when you asked your question.
Yes,
correct?
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Okay, we will go. We'll carry forward with a 10 then. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you for weighing in there. So yeah, there we go. The total score is 74, and as such, we would move forward to Regional Council with a positive recommendation, basically requesting that they set a date for the heritage hearing, and then ultimately add the subject property to the Registry of Heritage Property for HRN. Thank you very much. If there's any questions or comments, I can try to answer those now.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments for Jesse before we put the motion on the table?
Call for the question.
Pardon me?
Call for the question on the motion.
Thank you. Okay, I will call for the question, please.
Question?
Sorry?
Question?
Call for the motion.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Anybody want to read the motion? No?
I'll move that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend Halifax Regional Council, 1, to set a date for a heritage hearing to consider the inclusion of the subject property in the Registry of Heritage Properties for the Halifax Regional Municipality, and 2, approve the request to include 5663 Cornwall Street, Halifax, in the Registry of Heritage Properties for Halifax Regional Municipality, as shown in map 1 of September 24, 2021 report as the Municipal Heritage Property under the Heritage Property Act.
Thank you, Councillor. I need a seconder now.
I'll second that, Sandra.
All those in favor of the motion on the table?
Aye.
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 Contrary minded? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jesse, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to item 9.1.2, case H00498, amendment to bylaw H200 to revise heritage impact statement requirements. This was the item that we had correspondence on, but I believe we will have a presentation from staff first, and then we can consider that correspondence from the public.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Seamus McGrail, Senior Heritage Planner here. I'm just going to attempt to share my screen and fire up the PowerPoint here, and Simon may need to help me out if I'm not successful. Can everyone see this PowerPoint? Any problems viewing the
no, unfortunately not.
Okay. let me just see here. So, okay, let me just see here. How about that? Can you see that?
Yep.
We're all good now, Seamus.
And you can see the slides advance?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Wonderful. I thank you, Madam Chair. This is a case H0049, amendments to the Heritage Property Bylaw H200 to revise requirements around heritage impact statements. So the origin of this motion dates back to April of 2020. Halifax Regional Council requested two items for staff to look into. The first item was really asking staff to look into heritage impact statements and requiring them for all discretionary planning applications for properties on heritage buildings and abutting heritage buildings, registered heritage buildings as well. The second ask from council was to look at requiring heritage professionals to prepare these heritage impact statements, specifically heritage professionals recognized by the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals, that organization called CAP. So in this presentation, I'm going to address each of these two requests separately, just because they're very distinct. Dealing with the first one first. So I'm just dividing into two parts. So looking at this idea of requiring heritage impact statements for discretionary planning applications. So as many of you are familiar by now, Heritage Property Act doesn't deal with discretionary planning applications per se. That's dealt with under the charter. What we do under the Heritage Property Act is where there are discretionary planning applications like development agreements or rezonings that affect a registered heritage property. These are dealt with either as demolition requests or substantial alteration applications under the Heritage Property Act. And we do have conservation standards as well. And these substantial alteration and demolition requests are dealt with under the applications of the HRM conservation standards. And we've adopted the national standards. And you can see the cover of those standards here. So heritage impact statements are important when evaluating certain applications for substantial alteration and demolition. Our heritage property bylaw currently includes a definition for a heritage impact statement. It's a study to determine if any heritage resource will be impacted by a specific proposed development or site alteration. And the statement should demonstrate how the heritage resource will be conserved in the context of a redevelopment or site alteration, and which measures or alternative approaches may be recommended to mitigate or avoid potential negative impacts of a property's character defining elements. And our current H200, which is our heritage property bylaw, and you see some images of it here. It includes a Schedule A, contents of a heritage impact statement. It's only a one-page schedule, which provides a brief outline to applicants of what they need to submit for a heritage impact statement. I'm trying to use some visuals here because otherwise the presentation could be quite dry and just text heavy. So I'm trying to liven it up here a bit with some visuals. The staff frequently require heritage impact statements for discretionary applications or substantial alterations that affect heritage resources. It's a general practice of staff to request these heritage impact statements. Heritage impact statements provide a framework for evidence-based decision-making for staff and committees to develop recommendations and ultimately for council to make informed decisions on applications. So updating the requirements for heritage impact statements are in line with current practices. So we're looking to establish some policy to bring it in line with the current practices. Currently, the Heritage Property Bylaw H200 only requires heritage impact statements. So staff can only require heritage impact statements for very specific types of development. And right now it's limited to rooftop additions that exceed 50% of the gross floor area of an existing building, only in downtown Halifax. So it's very, very specific in terms of when we can require a heritage impact statement. Like I said, we've been asking for these statements as part of general planning applications, and we've been receiving them. But in terms of requiring them, we're very limited in that capacity. So the current provisions under H200 are insufficient in meeting council's request. So we're going to look at some options here for meeting council's request. In terms of abutting development, this report is not making any recommendations pertaining to abutting development. The Heritage Property Bylaw H200 implements the Heritage Property Act. So for abutting development, there's no ability to require heritage impact statements for properties that are outside the boundaries of a registered heritage property. We do have policy under the regional plan, under policy CH16, and under the policy 5.8 of the recently adopted regional center plan, and policy 49 of the downtown Halifax secondary municipal planning strategy do require certain criteria to be met for development abutting registered heritage properties. But right now there's no requirement under H200. So what we're proposing to do is continue to use policies and secondary municipal planning strategies and bring them up to date and in line with what we're proposing for H200. Heritage conservation districts as well have their own bylaws. So what we're proposing is that we continue to use the Heritage Conservation District bylaws when Heritage Conservation Districts come online to develop heritage impact statement requirements specific to these Heritage Conservation Districts, and that H200 should apply to registered heritage properties outside of Heritage Conservation Districts. And the bylaws of the HCDs can address impact statements within the HCDs. So turning now to Council's second request, looking at this idea of qualified heritage professionals. Right now, there are 2 organizations in Canada that focus on developing best practices for heritage professionals in Canada. The ICOMOS Canada and CAP, the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. ICOMOS Canada, the Canadian National Committee of the International Council on Monuments and Sites, they generally develop documentation standards, and they're focused on documentation surrounding the best practices for the conservation of heritage resources, whereas CAP is the only organization focused on professional practice directly affecting the identification and conservation of heritage properties. So staff have determined that both ICOMOS Canada and CAP require an evaluation program to become a member, and they both have ethical standards for professional practitioners. However, CAP is more focused on professional practice. So determined that CAP is a more appropriate organization for determining qualified heritage professionals. So in terms of the actual amendments that we're suggesting be made to the Heritage Property Bylaw H200, we've defined heritage planner, what a heritage planner is under H200, and heritage planner is the staff person who can request detailed elevation drawings, site plan drawn to scale, prepared by appropriately qualified professionals. So this language is currently not in H200. And by introducing this language, we can ensure that any submissions in support of a substantial alteration or demolition of a heritage property is prepared by a professional architect or a professional engineer in that case. We're also suggesting updates here to conditions when a heritage impact statement is required. So we're suggesting that a heritage impact statement be required for any demolition of a municipal heritage property and for any substantial alteration to a heritage property with a gross floor area in excess of 50% of the gross floor area of the existing buildings. So as you recall, right now it's limited to rooftop additions, so construction on top of heritage buildings. What we're suggesting is that if any addition, whether it be at the rear or the side of a heritage building in excess of 50%, we can then require a heritage impact statement. And we do have wording here where a heritage impact statement shall be prepared by a qualified heritage professional. And we're introducing a definition for qualified heritage professional, and that is a professional member in good standing with the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. So those are the more substantive changes that we're proposing to bylaw H200. We've also revised Schedule A. As I mentioned, Schedule A currently is only a brief outline of the content required, and what we've replaced it with is Schedule A1, which is a much more robust document detailing specifically what's required for a heritage impact statement. And what we've heard back from applicants who have prepared heritage impact statements is they could continue to ask for more detail in terms of what's required. So this document will help provide that detail. We often also receive heritage impact statements that are kind of loose and don't meet the requirements. So a more robust document detailing the requirements will help fulfill those needs around heritage impact statements. So some of the things we asked for in the revised heritage impact statement are an introduction, background research and analysis, a prepared statement of significance, an assessment of existing conditions, a description of the proposed development or site alterations, an analysis of the impact of those proposed changes to a site, consideration given to alternatives and mitigative strategies, a conservation strategy, and a list of required appendices as well. And I just want to mention that we're going to include a 1-year time frame from the time these amendments are adopted to H200 before a qualified heritage professional is required to prepare these heritage impact statements. And this will provide enough time for local architects or heritage professionals to acquire the CAP membership. It takes about just under a year to acquire that membership to meet the qualifications and the application requirements. So that 1-year period will provide enough time for local professionals to acquire the CAP membership. And we're also going to be notifying organizations like the Professional Architects Association of Nova Scotia, professional planners, and a few other professional members organizations in Canada, in Nova Scotia, once if these amendments are adopted by council. We've also done quite a bit of benchmarking. We looked at 10 municipalities throughout Canada, and what we've determined is that so heritage impact statements are required throughout these. Many of these organizations, most of these jurisdictions require qualified heritage conservation professionals to prepare heritage impact statements, and many of them cite CAP, Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals, as the organization to belong to. And many of them have, there's a table attached to the staff report that shows sort of the breakdown of the benchmarking that we did. So the recommendation before you here is it's recommended that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that Regional Council adopt bylaw H204, amending bylaw H200, the heritage property bylaw. And the amendments are laid out in detail in attachment B. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, staff are available.
Okay, thanks very much, Seamus. I am going to ask that we put the motion on the floor and then we can have a discussion about it if anybody has any questions for Seamus. Anybody feel like making that motion?
I can move it if you like.
Great.
I move that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt bylaw H204, amending bylaw H200, the Heritage Property Bylaw, as set out in attachment B of the August 24th, 2021 report. I so move.
Seconder?
This is Patrick. I can second that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Seamus before we vote on the motion? Or any clarifications or anything needed?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Sandra. I was wondering how difficult it is to get this heritage designation, this heritage professional designation. And would there be a number of people in HRM who would be interested in getting this?
Thank you. Thank you for the question through the chair. If you've been practicing in the heritage field for a number of years, you need to work with a current CAP member to become a sponsor for you and to recommend you as a member to the organization. Our colleague Aaron Murnahan is a member of CAP, and he may be able to speak a bit more clearly. He became a member not too long ago. He may be able to speak a bit more clearly about the process to become a member.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. It's about a 6-month process if you've got the requisite number of years of professional practice and education that is required as part of professional membership. So currently you need about 2 years of concentrated work experience, working directly with the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places. You need to be able to demonstrate that. And as Seamus mentioned, you need a current CAP member as a sponsor to vouch for your resume and for the quality of your work. And you also need to have some requisite education. So for myself, I have a planning degree and a history degree that was considered sufficient for membership. And I've been in talks with the board of directors for CAP, and they feel that if people are eligible, professionals are eligible within HRM, that they could process a very high number of applications in a short period of time to bring those professionals up to the qualifications that will be required within a year of this being adopted.
Lois here. I went to the CAP website because I was curious. They have 400 members across the country. Only 7 of them appear to be able to practice within HRM, and not all of them are residing locally. I congratulate you on your participation in CAP. I believe it's that level of professionalism is well merited for this kind of activity. But I'm curious about their other classifications. There were 2 or 3 other groups of membership that you could apply for. Can you provide any information on that?
So through you, Madam Chair, there are both subscriber and interim members of CAP, but neither of those hold professional designation. So you can't use the CAP acronym after your name, and you're not recognized as a working heritage professional. So the intention would be through this report that we would only recognize those that have full membership as professional members in the organization.
Thank you, Aaron. That's helpful. That suggests to me that the 1-year window may be insufficient, and I'm wondering whether 18 months would not be advisable.
Through you, Madam Chair, what we have been seeing lately, and sorry to speak for you, Seamus, on this, but we've seen a number of major applications where heritage impact statements are being developed through the use of professionals outside of Nova Scotia as a means to gain the required expertise to draft those documents. And that's not unlike some other major planning applications if the requisite experience is not available locally. But certainly what we do see through this report is the growth of a local pool of expertise that is already there, but isn't necessarily recognized because those professionals have not become full members. But we certainly heard from a number of applicants that we work with on a regular basis who do intend to seek membership in the near term. So that doesn't concern me, but certainly if it's of concern to the committee, you could certainly recommend that time period be extended as part of your adoption.
If I can just add to Aaron's comments, as I mentioned, we've also received heritage impact statements that are prepared by non-heritage professionals. So professional architects or planners, or even sometimes professionals from other disciplines that don't have the requisite experience in heritage that have been submitting these documents to us, and we're in a position where we have to accept these documents now. What we're hoping to do is develop some professional standards so that qualified heritage professionals are submitting these documents. So there is a risk that we'll continue to receive documents that are not prepared by qualified heritage professionals if we wait too long to require that sort of standardization of the profession.
Thank you for that too, Seamus. I'm all in favor of increased professionalization to lend ultimate credibility to these impact statements. I'm just interested in whether a pool can be developed locally. I appreciate we can use expertise from outside the jurisdiction, but it would be encouraging to see the growth of a home industry around it. And perhaps we'll just have to wait to see whether that can be accomplished, but this will give it impetus. So I thank you both.
Thanks, Lois. If it makes you feel any better, I personally know 2 or 3 people who are definitely qualified to have this in Nova Scotia who currently do this sort of work. They just don't have their CAP membership, and they will likely be pursuing that and will be qualified to pursue that. So
that's very encouraging.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any other questions for Seamus on this item, or these 2 items, I guess, these dual items? Okay, hearing none, I believe we are ready for a vote. So the motion on the floor is that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend the Halifax Regional Council adopt bylaw H204, amending bylaw H200 for the Heritage Property Bylaw as set out in attachment B of the August 24th, 2020 report. That was tabled by Councillor Stoddard. We will take the vote now. All those in favor, please say aye.
Affirmative.
Excuse.
Aye. Oh, sorry, am I doing something wrong?
Excuse me, I'm just wondering about the correspondence was relevant to.
Oh my
this,
gosh, Sandra, thank you so much for reminding me. I completely forgot about it. We weren't.
Because we can't pass this and then deal with the correspondence. That's not.
You're right. Thank you for reminding me. That was my fault. I completely forgot to consider it. Okay, so as we talked about earlier in this meeting, sorry, I'm going to take that question for a vote off the floor there. As we discussed earlier in this meeting, there was some correspondence received about this item 9.1.2. I will open this up to the committee. Does anybody wish to make any comments about the correspondence received? We can consider this in terms of whether or not we want to put the motion forward or make changes to the motion or what have you.
Well, Madam Chair, I have to leave to another meeting here in Sheet Harbor, but I just wanted to put my vote on the record. I'm in favor of this of the motions before us, and so if I can pre-vote that on now and say yes, because I have to go to another meeting here in Sheet Harbor at 4 o'clock.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. That's no problem.
Yep.
Although maybe it is a problem. Simon, is it a problem?
We won't be able to, I believe, record that. It has to be at the vote in time, but we do recognize that members know your indications.
All right, well, I can wait here a couple minutes, and just people are still straggling in, so I'll wait a couple minutes.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Does anybody, Sandra, I know that you were looking to talk about it. Did you want to open up the conversation about this correspondence?
Well, I think the people that have these concerns in Schmidtville have a valid case, because if there's going to be construction, it's not going to affect just the adjacent heritage property. It's going to affect properties across the street and down the street. And I'm wondering what we can do about that.
Okay, so I think the committee, in case anybody's not clear, I believe their request was to change the definition of what adjacent would mean, or broaden adjacent into when considering the necessity for a heritage impact statement for discretionary applications. Seamus, I'm not sure sorry, what was that?
What their recommendation was, that adjacent be changed to any registered building or heritage districts within 100 feet of the proposed development. This is in keeping with what is done with permit variance requests. And also to include the heritage impact reports, a victim statement of the heritage property owner.
Below us here, and this would be a question for Seamus and Aaron. Schmidtville is its own heritage conservation district. Does it address that issue within its formal bylaw structure? That's what I was confused about when I read it.
Do you want me to answer that, Seamus, or do you want to answer?
Sure, I can follow up. I can follow up you, Aaron, if there's anything that you haven't mentioned.
Sure. So the Schmidtville Heritage Conservation District bylaw really only deals with properties that fall within its boundary. So the construction that Mr. Breckenridge is referring to is happening adjacent to to his property and adjacent to the district, but not within it. But there are a number of policies and requirements from a planning and engineering perspective that applicants must adhere to, such as construction. They must submit a construction mitigation plan that's reviewed by our program engineers ahead of any construction. And they do have to notify nearby residents if there is going to be blasting, and there is requirements under the blasting bylaw if there is going to be any explosive used on the site. So from that perspective, there are a number of requirements that applicants must follow independent of whether they're adjacent to a heritage property. There are also a number of planning policies which do come into play that deal with impact on the general area. But the issue at play here is that we're proposing to amend bylaw H200, which speaks directly to the Heritage Property Act. The Heritage Property Act really only allows us to have control over what happens within the boundaries of a specific heritage property or within the boundaries of a heritage conservation district. Schmidtville has its own requirements for heritage impact statements. We're looking to increase the requirements for those heritage impact statements outside of established HCDs. But under the Heritage Property Act, we can only deal with the heritage property at hand, as Seamus said in his presentation, not abutting or adjacent properties.
Thank you, Aaron and Seamus. That was what I had deduced from reading the background material. I was also looking, though, at the benchmarking that you provided, which was very helpful, and looking at the City of Ottawa, and there they require the impact statement for development applications adjacent to or within 35 meters of designated buildings and areas, or applications adjacent to the Rideau Canal, the experimental farm, et cetera, How does this intersect? And is that something that could be incorporated in amending anything required within the HCD documentation?
And again, Seamus, if I'm missing anything here, please feel free to jump in. Ottawa is a special case because they fall under the National Capital Commission, which has its own requirements, but also the Ontario Heritage Act has a number of differences from the Nova Scotia Heritage Property Act. It's a more nimble piece of legislation that gives municipalities a little bit more control over changes to heritage properties. They have 2 levels of registration, protection, lots of stuff that we would love to have incorporated into our legislation in Nova Scotia. But unfortunately, we don't have that power under the Act to influence what happens on adjacent properties. The only power that we have is under the Regional Planning Strategy Policy CH16. And currently that's a fairly vague policy at this point, which we're looking to strengthen through the regional plan review that's underway right now.
Again, thank you both very much. We learn something all the time through this committee, but that may indicate that as you are working on amendments and updates, that this may be a way of speaking to the citizens of Schmidtville and their particular concerns. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that deals with the first request made by Mr. Breckenridge. The other 2, there's a request for I think it pertains to the other portion of your presentation. The other is that heritage groups be included in the definition of professional. I believe Seamus, and I don't want to answer on your behalf, but I believe that they would be more than welcome to apply to become designated heritage professionals under CAP and meet the requisite requirements, and then that would be they'd be considered heritage professionals. Am I right there?
Yes, Madam Chair, they'd certainly be welcome to apply under CAP. From my understanding, the Heritage Trust of Nova Scotia and other organizations that are not ECOMOS Canada or CAP do not have the same rigorous level of vetting to become a professional member. The CAP and ECOMOS Canada and especially CAP has an entrance requirement process and a code of ethics for its members. So these are very much distinct from other heritage organizations in that they vet and determine who is and is not an expert in heritage and the practice of heritage conservation.
Understood. Thanks, Seamus. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to say about that item of correspondence? Okay, great. All impact reports be made public domain. I'll flip this one back to you, but I'm quite sure that they already are based on the fact that applications are online.
Yeah, there's a specific requirement in the amending language that says that a heritage impact statement will become part of the application. So once it becomes part of the application, it's public information.
I believe, Madam Chair, that Mr. Breckenridge is speaking about a very particular instance where an applicant, for some reason, undertook a heritage impact statement of sorts, despite the fact that they were not required to by heritage staff. And in that case, since it's not associated with a planning application that requires a heritage impact statement, they wouldn't be required to release that information to the public.
Oh.
But any that we would require under bylaw H200, of course, would be made public through the requisite agenda items on the HAC agenda, and also through our planning applications.
Okay, understood. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions on that item or thoughts? No, okay. The next is ensure it be required that an impact report be published if development occurs within 100 feet of any proposed list of potential heritage district contained in the center plan. I think that we kind of dealt with that in the first item that we talked about, in the sense that there are limitations on when an HIS can be required, and therefore if one is not required or produced, you can't very well publish that. So does anybody, Lois, I noticed that you're unmuted. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I was getting ready for the vote.
Oh, you were. Look at you, all on top of things. Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like, any other questions that they'd like to clear up? This correspondence, or like the conversation that we're having now, will be available to in the minutes, and therefore the person who wrote the letter can certainly review what we concluded on this. Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add to this?
I might just mention for clarity, because I assume that Mr. Breckenridge and Ms. Morris are likely tuning into the meeting today, that we will have that opportunity through the regional plan review to add some additional considerations and impact assessments within the planning review process, not as part of bylaw H200, and that we'll certainly be seeking what we can do under that policy CH16 in the future. But this particular set of amendments is very specific to applications under the Heritage Property Act.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Aaron, for clarifying that. I think that tells us, that gives us a message as the committee as well, that there will be a time to consider this, but this is not the time or place right now yet, I guess. Okay, without further ado, all those in favor of the motion on the floor?
Aye.
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 Those contrary minded? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Just flipping back to the agenda here. Okay, the next is item 9.2, members of the Heritage Advisory Committee. I believe that that's items from members of the Heritage Advisory Committee. There are none. Motions or discussions. There are none on our agenda. Added items. There are also none. There were none, right, Simon? You may not.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. The only thing that I guess the remaining thing to discuss, the we have date of next meeting here is November 24th. There was an email circulated from Simon and from the clerk's office in general, looking to move these meeting dates. Looking to move the meeting dates for our next two meetings, the November meeting and the December meeting. We wanted to have a brief discussion about that in terms of whether there were any concerns about availability or access or anything of that nature that folks might want to discuss before we make a decision on whether or not to do that. So just 1 second here, I'll pull up what those dates are, Simon, unless you've got them in front of you.
Yeah, I can just briefly note them as well. We would be looking to move the November 24th meeting of HEC up to November 10th, again at 6 p.m. And likewise, we would be aiming to move the December 22nd meeting of HAC up to December 8th at 6 p.m. I have received some emails back. One member identified a potential time conflict with the December 8th meeting, but otherwise, no, I haven't received any notice of members identifying concerns.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other concerns with these times, or do we want to move them and hope that we'll have roughly close to quorum? If everybody says, no, I can't make it, then we have a problem, basically.
It's Jennifer. Simon, I originally said I had no problem with either, but I'm just realizing that on Wednesday, November 10th, I have a meeting from 6 to 7. So I could join after that meeting, but I can't be there right at that time.
So that's just missing one person currently from each meeting, which still leaves us with quorum.
I'm just realizing actually that I believe I've made an error on my part. I think I've gotten my wires crossed and I didn't notice it until now. I was initially thinking actually of moving the meetings to be consistent with our current meeting schedule for 3 p.m. I apologize for that. 6 p.m. is the meeting of another committee that I regularly move some dates around for.
No problem.
All members present, I believe, are there any concerns if we consider to be consistent with the current format of this committee, 3 to 5 p.m. meeting times?
Jennifer, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
It's fine for me.
This is Lois. I think that means that on the 8th of December, I would be available for 3 to 5 p.m.
Does anybody else have any concerns with November 10th from 3 to 5 or December 8th from 3 to 5?
I'm fine for 3 to 5.
This is Marisha. I'm fine with 3 to 5 for all of those times.
Patrick, this all works for me as well.
Okay, I believe that would roughly give us quorum then. All right, so then we are going to item 12 here on our agenda is date of next meeting. That's going to be November 8th, 2020. 10th, November 10th, 2021. I'm sorry. Don't show up on the 8th, there won't be a meeting. November 10th, 2021. I look forward to seeing you all there. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please, unless there's anything else, Simon?
Nothing from me other than to thank all members for their patience.
No problem.
All right. Sandra?
Sandra, sorry, you moved
yes,
to adjourn?
I moved to adjourn.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. And seconder, please.
I'll second Lois.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for your time this afternoon, and we'll see you on November 10th.
Thanks so
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.